promise, here's me walking you through the 5 questions that you have to be able to answer for the test. I'm going to balance. Well, wait for it. Apparently it takes a minute to load. So here's me talking you through the short answer questions that you need to know for the test. I'm going to balance my desire to tell you as many things as possible and help you as much as I can with my desire to keep this under 13 minutes so that you won't complain. But I'll do my very best. Pause, take a second, and appreciate these memes. They're pretty awesome. My favorite one is probably this one. These are all Alexander Hamilton, who's dead now. He died in 1804. Well, he's dead, but I mean, he's dead by the time of the War of 1812. He died in 1804 in a duel. And then, of course, a little Washington for you. So, number 1. The first question asks you about Marbury v. Madison. If you have a good memory for details, you should answer this question because it won't be too hard. If you're not going to be able to tell me what happened, don't choose it, but I will remind you. Remember that you had John Adams as president, and he was about to leave. He was elected in 1796, and then in 1800, Thomas Jefferson was elected in a peaceful transfer of power. It wasn't peaceful in that they were very sassy to each other, but there was no violence. Remember that William Marbury was one of the judges that he appointed, one of those last-minute judges he appointed. They called them the midnight judges. Remember that it is the president's province or job to appoint judges that then have to be confirmed by the Senate. So he appointed William Marbury and a number of other Federalists to these important positions. And in fact, Congress passed a law creating more judgeships for him to fill. And he did this at the last minute. But on his way out, he failed to have his Secretary of State failed to actually sign off those commissions, giving them their jobs. So men like Marbury never actually received their commission, so they couldn't actually work. And remember that having a federal judgeship is a pretty sweet job. You have a job for life. They serve for life tenure. So the new president, who is a Republican, Thomas Jefferson, arrives and discovers that these men have not been given their commissions, and he's pleased about that because he doesn't want the federal judges of D.C. and around the area to be all Federalists who are unlikely to support his policies. So his Secretary of State, James Madison, that's the reference there of Madison, he tells his Secretary of State not to deliver the commissions. And this makes William Marbury upset, so Marbury sues Madison. Marbury sues Madison under the Judiciary Act of 1789, which gave the Supreme Court permission or the ability to enforce executive actions or to force government officials to do the job that they have been given. So Marbury asks John Marshall, who's a Federalist and the Chief Justice, asks him to force Madison to deliver his commission. So there you have John Marshall, remember he's a Federalist, and he essentially says, I can't help you. That Judiciary Act of 1789, that part that gave me permission to force Madison to deliver your commission by issuing a writ of mandamus, the one you want me to use, it's unconstitutional. And while we think of the ability to declare laws unconstitutional as being pretty much the whole point of the Supreme Court, that's not in the Constitution. That only comes about because of the case of Marbury v. Madison. So the biggest takeaway from Marbury v. Madison is this ability of the Supreme Court to declare laws or executive actions unconstitutional. This is a quote you should remember. You may not be able to reproduce it perfectly, but you should remember that Marshall, in his opinion, said it is emphatically, definitely the province or job and duty of the judicial department to say what the law is or interpret the law. Number 2, how and why did Jefferson change from being a strict constructionist to a loose constructionist when it came to the Constitution? I feel like we talked a lot about this when we went through it, so I'm going to take you through it quickly. Remember that the Federalists wanted a national bank. Part of Hamilton's plan was a national bank, a place that they would be able to deposit federal funds. This was not especially good for farmers, and it wasn't in the Constitution. So Jefferson quickly, and the rest of the Republicans quickly said, no, we're going to be strict about this. We're going to whip out our pocket Constitution, flip through it, and we're going to see there is no provision for the creation of a national bank. Of course, the Federalists are going to say that this is implied, that it's part of that necessary and proper clause. Remember, part of Article 1 gives the Congress permission to pass any laws necessary and proper, and they're going to argue that it is. Now, when it comes to Louisiana Territory, this land that he decides to purchase during his presidency, this is a lot of new farmland, and this is really good for farmers, aka his Republicans, but it's not in the Constitution. So now he finds himself in a bit of a quandary. And as a result, he decides to reverse his original position and take a more loosey-goosey interpretation of the Constitution and become a loose constructionist. I want you to remember the hypocrisy of this, not because I'm anti-Jefferson, but I want you to appreciate that he started off his presidency saying, I'm going to cut federal spending. I'm going to shrink the size of the federal government. So he said he wanted to cut spending, and then he bought Louisiana, which, although a good deal for cents on the acre, was a really big government expense. Of course, the Federalists became Willy Wonka and said, tell me about how that's constitutional. Now, remember his justification. In the Constitution, the executive branch has the power to create treaties with foreign countries, and he decided that this was a treaty, this purchase of the Louisiana purchase from France. Number 3, who was Toussaint Louverture? Good news, there won't be a pronunciation test. And how did he inadvertently help the U.S. gain the Louisiana Territory? He had no intention, of course, of doing that, but he managed to do that. So really, the most important thing I need you to remember are these. There's him on the left. I want you to take a look at the 2 images on the right. I want you to especially pay attention to this one. Wait for it. So this is what's happening in Haiti. This is what's happening in Haiti under Louverture's revolution. I want you to appreciate that the French are kind of having a hard time hanging on to this, which was Haiti, which was the bedrock of their North American empire. They were really attempting to hold control of Haiti, and they really maintained control of Haiti as a colony. Of course, they took control of the Louisiana Purchase when Spain gave it to them, but they took authority of the Louisiana Purchase when Spain gave it to them, but they didn't actually station people there and really try to control it. Haiti was not that way. Haiti they expected to have control of, and they used it as a base of operations. So when Louverture's revolution makes them lose their foothold in North America in this respect, they are going to be hard pressed to continue to fight the British and continue to try to hang on to North America. So this is going to inspire Napoleon to be more willing to sell. Another thing to consider, take a look at this map, which is going to show France proper. It's going to show French satellites or areas that are under the control of France in light green. It's also going to show allies of France that are in purple. And then, of course, in orangey red, you have the French enemies. But if you look at this, France has been hard at work attempting to control basically all of Europe. And you will see here, if you are not aware of this, you'll learn a lot more about this in world history. Napoleon is going to attempt to invade Russia, which is not going to go well. So he's kind of busy in Europe with all that he's trying to accomplish, and he loses his base in France. And as a result of that, in Haiti. So as a result of that, he's going to be more willing to sell the Louisiana Territory and consolidate because he's trying to finance a series of wars all at once. Next. The Embargo Act of 1807. Remember that image, and I should have put it on here. Remember that image of that evil-looking man with his arms around, in that case, it was Cuba because America has had an embargo act against Cuba. The idea here of the Embargo Act, remember, was this idea of we were trying to maintain neutrality, and both the British and the French were violating our neutrality by impressing our soldiers, the British much more, but the French to a small extent, and by stopping our ships and seizing their cargo and sometimes seizing those ships. So the idea was that we could maintain neutrality, but when neutrality didn't work, Jefferson said, okay, well, if you're not going to respect our neutrality and respect our shipping rights, we won't trade with any of you. This is one of those other hypocritical moments for Jefferson. He's often attacked by people for his hypocrisy. Take a look at what he has said, that commerce or trade with all nations should be our motto. Then he turns around and passes the Embargo Act, whereby we do trade with no nations. One of the effects of the Embargo Act, inadvertent, of course, and didn't mean for this to happen, but it destroyed international trade. That is, American trade with international countries. And again, his hope here is that it will hurt the British, it'll hurt to a lesser extent the French, and as a result that they'll come crawling back and agree to trade with us again. What doesn't actually happen is that. What happens instead is that the U.S. loses a lot of money. One figure cited is $80 million in trade as a result of this Embargo Act. Now, it's going to hurt the Federalists, of course, because they are the ones who engage in the most trade, but you should also consider that there are ways in which it ends up helping them, and we're going to take a look at that in a second. Now, this is a tariff. This is different, but I think this may help you because I feel like you never fully understood a tariff. Some of you were very diligent and memorized the Quizlet that said protect American manufacturing, and you got it right on the test, but you may not fully understand how that works. So take a moment and look at this image, and I'm going to explain the tariff to you, and I'm going to explain to you how this in some ways helps the Federalists. Oh, I should have mentioned, of course, the Federalists don't lose all their trade because the Federalists return, of course, to their time-honored, the New Englanders, I should say, return to their time-honored tradition of smuggling that they've been doing ever since the original British taxes that harmed them. So they still have good smuggling strategies and smuggling routes. So while it does hurt the Americans, it doesn't really hurt the British much because the Federals still find a way to trade with them, although they, of course, are going to lose some of their trade with having something. Back to the tariff. Take a look at this. We have American-made cloth that costs $4 a roll. That same cloth in Britain also costs $4 a roll. The idea here is that we want to make sure that people buy American, that we have American manufacturing being protected. So what a tariff does, remember a tariff is an import tax. I feel like you may not have thought that through, a tax on imports. So when British cloth is imported into America, if we add this tariff, and this is just an example, if we add a 25% tariff, now that British cloth costs $5 a roll. So obviously, if you are in America and you are a consumer, you're going to buy the $4 cloth instead of the $5 cloth. So when I say it protects American manufacturing, it's American goods more appealing because they're cheaper than foreign goods. So the tariff in that way is helpful to manufacturers and helpful to the Federalists. But think about the embargo at the same time. The embargo draws a line here. Jefferson says, nope, we will not trade with any foreign nation. So if British cloth is off the table, the only cloth to be purchased, and that's just one example, there's a lot of goods, the only cloth to be purchased then is American made. So it hurts American Federalist international trade, but it does end up helping them in some respects because now it's their goods that are going to be bought by and large. Last one, the causes, course, and consequences of the War of 1812. There's three real important ones that I want you to be aware of. Oh, I'm doing okay on time. Of course, there's impressment. This is the one we always talk about. Impressment's a lot more complex than the book or really history gives it credit for. A lot of the people that the British were impressing, a lot of the people that they were hog-tying and kidnapping were actually British sailors in the first place, British sailors who had run away from their British postings to join Americans. So please know that not all of this impressment was the innocent capture of innocent Americans, but notwithstanding, this was a thing that was frustrating. Take a look at this one, which will help you. Of course, one of the things that we give as a reason for the War of 1812 and declaring war on Great Britain is their impressment of our soldiers. However, remember those war hawks who are coincidentally Southerners? One of the things that you'll find is that a lot of Federalists say that this war isn't really about impressment. This war is about our desire to take Canada. Because remember that in this was 1796, but it'll work. In 1796, the British still control Canada, which, while somewhat cold in some areas, also has a number of resources that we would benefit from. So there was the accusation that really this was not just about defending Americans, American sailors, but also about a land grab, that we were not satisfied with what we had taken from Britain so far, and we wanted to take more and more, and in this case, Canada. Finally, remember that the British are still arming Americans like Tecumseh. Tecumseh was an ally of the British in his attempt to drive out the Americans and to keep them from taking his territory. So the impressment of sailors, the arming of Native Americans in the Northwest Territory, and the desire to take new land away from Britain in Canada. Now, as for the course, I'm not going to go through all of these. You can memorize. I asked you for 3 of them. You can memorize 3 of them. We attempt to invade Canada and fail. Perry, on the other hand, does have some success. He defeats the British. The British have tried to invade Detroit, and thankfully here on Lake Erie, Oliver Hazard Perry, the American sailor, manages to defeat them, so that's helpful. Tecumseh does get killed by William Henry Harrison when William Henry Harrison pursues. Oh, I'm sorry. When William Henry Harrison pursues the British who are fleeing and the Native Americans, their allies, he manages to kill Tecumseh and thus kill a lot of the power of the Native Americans because he was a powerful leader. Jackson is going to have 2 notable battles in this war that you'll want to be aware of. The reason you want to be aware of this is largely because he's going to ride into the presidency on his military success. He's going to defeat the Creek tribe in Georgia, who are a powerful tribe in the South, and they're going to have to cede millions or give up millions of acres of land as a result of it. He's also going to have that amazing defeat of the British. The 71 Americans are going to kill 2,000 or so Brits. Unfortunately, that happened 2 weeks after the war. He doesn't just do this out of meanness. He does it because he didn't get news of the treaty until after he had just finished defending New Orleans. Also notable, of course, the British do burn the White House. Dolly Madison saves the George Washington portrait and a number of other ones. They do burn the White House, but as they are proceeding to try to invade, they fail to take Baltimore, and as Francis Scott Key watches and he sees the flag was still there, he writes the Star Spangled Banner, which is much later adopted as our national anthem. Shoot, this is a little long. Finally, The consequences of the War of 1812, I won't read those to you. Really, you know the first three. The fourth one we didn't talk about a lot, but I do want to mention. The Hartford Convention, you've got to be aware of that. This is a meeting of Federalists where they're talking about seceding from the Union. And they're talking about how they don't support Mr. Madison's war, the War of 1812. Remember that because as a result of this, the British are going to blockade and keep our trade or prevent trade. This is going to hurt the Federalists and the traders and the New Englanders more than it's going to hurt others. They don't see this war as actually being beneficial. So they have a Hartford Convention where they actually do talk about seceding from the Union. The problem, though, is that just as that is happening, the war ends and they end up looking really disloyal to the country and unpatriotic. And this is going to be one of the final nails in the coffin for the Federalist Party. We're going to talk more about this image. You can see in this, the Hartford Convention candidate, the Federalist candidate is depicted as, and the Republican candidate is depicted in a much different way. Hope this helps. Feel free to email if you have any questions, and I look forward to seeing you on Monday.